there's no one culture for a company. And at first I was trying to like ram that down, like, a square in a circle peg type thing. But quickly realized that actually, you can have traits that everyone adheres to, but really each department needs to have its own version of what they deem as like an appropriate culture.
At Elements of Culture, we sit down with experts in leadership and team building to explore the DNA that drives a thriving organization. Welcome, everyone, to Elements of Culture. My name is Taryn, and I'm joined with Julie, my co host. And today we have the pleasure of talking to Max Mitcham. He is the founder and CEO of Trigify. It's a social media intelligence company that really helps connect the buyer's journey within the sales funnel. So, Max, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really excited for this, and thanks for having me.
Course. We're excited to have some great conversation. Before we dig into things too deeply, give us a little bit of background. You started Trigify about 2.5 years ago. Is that correct?
Wow. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. Pretty much 2.5 years ago.
Okay. And then prior to that, you have an extensive background with sales. I know we want to touch on a little, but tell us kind of about how your journey has led to where you're at today with Trigify.
Yeah, of course. So, well, it turns out far back ago. I started my career in sales in a gym, selling gym memberships, and hated it. And no, I eventually applied for this job just because it sounded cool. It said like international experience at this company called Meltwater, which is a meeting monitoring and a social listening company. And they, if you haven't heard of them, they are probably like one of the biggest beasts when it comes to like a sales org. They've got about 2,000 salespeople, an unbelievable culture, and graduate like fast track program. Like at the time when I was working for them, they only promoted internally. So everyone started as like a graduate, and you basically just worked your way up through the different roles. And so I started as a sales consultant and ended up becoming a managing director within a couple of years. And it was a really good experience running teams across Europe and the UK. And they eventually went to IPO'd. And then I went to work for another company, a startup now, as the VP of sales there once I had done Meltwater. And I didn't mention this to you, but I moved across to the US, grew teams in New York, and then moved down to Florida. It was a lot more my speed down in Florida, hated New York. And got them up to 5 million ARR before I kind of realized, I've had exposure in the startup space, and I've had exposure with taking at the time I joined Meltwater, they were, a growth company through to an IPO. I think it's time to go and do my own thing. I've had kind of that like learnings from both ends of the spectrum. And that's Trigify was kind of born 2.5 years ago. And it's been a bit of a roller coaster since.
I'm sure. I'm sure taking on anything new to that, starting a company, it's quite the roller coaster, I'm sure. So
Yeah. Yeah.
let's dive into that a little bit. So tell us about Trigify. How did you kind of identify like this is the space, this is where there's a need to start developing, kind of that social intelligence for companies? What really brought that on?
So it never started as a social intelligence tool. So originally, what it was funny enough. When I moved to New York, I was hiring an SDR with the previous company that I worked at, and I just couldn't believe the salary of someone who had no sales experience. And I was like, this must be a joke. Like you can't be. And and at the time it was a 60K base salary, and everyone was telling me that that's actually a bit cheap for a graduate SDR in New York. And I was like, this is madness. And it dawned on me that when I was there, and I was like, okay, there must be a way to start to automate a lot of the work that an SDR does to then just have people that, spend time with customers and focus on customers rather than just building lists, emailing people, and things like that. And I started teaching myself how to code. And this led to me starting to create these automation systems and things like that. Long story short is when I went and started Trigify, I initially started as like an agency, and I would just go into businesses and build out these automations. And at the time, this was pre-AI SDR, but that's effectively what I was doing for people. I was building out a tool around that. And so I thought, well, why don't I productize this? And I hired some offshore developers and built out this whole like prototype around this AI SDR concept. And day one of launch, I was watching how people were using it, and I was like, do you know what? I actually don't think there's a future in this. I think it needs to be more like AI enabled rather than like AI like running the entire like show. And so I pivoted Trigify day one to become more of like an all-encompassing signal tool. So we were like signals for all salespeople. And then 6 months, 7 months went down the line, and I was like, again, I don't feel like we've quite hit the nail on product market fit. And so I pivot us again to then focus on social, because we at the time we had just launched a new signal, and it was a social signal, and everyone was loving it, and people were mainly using that. And I was like, you know what? Let's just focus specifically on that. We took the gamble. We churned half of our customers at the time and just went down this avenue. And ever since we've done that, we've been growing about 30% month on month, and it's kind of just skyrocketed as a result. So don't be afraid to kind of pivot and take leaps of faith, because that's what we keep doing. And we've kind of, I don't know whether it's stubbornness, but we finally found like a level of product market fit with where we're at.
So that's really interesting. And I really want to kind of focus a little bit on that because when we talk about people who want to, do startups and things, talk to me a little bit about your motivation for that. Because we call it healthy risk.
Yeah.
And I think when you were talking about the product market fit and it not working, so how many times did you do that? 2, 3?
We pivoted in some shape or form about 4 times in
Yeah.
total. We're about to go again. This isn't necessarily a pivot. This is more of like a change in go-to-market strategy. The product's kind of staying the same now, but we're doing another big calculated gamble. So yeah, it's healthy risk. I mean, it's funny you say that. Like, I picked the worst time possible to start my own business. My wife was 9 months pregnant, so I started Trigify 2 weeks before my first daughter was born, and left like, as a VP of sales, you're in a good salary, and it's a consistent good salary, and went to nothing, and then registered Trigify. So I don't know what it was, but I just felt like, you can, if you believe in yourself, you can control your own destiny. And I kind of backed myself, and I weirdly operate very well under pressure and stress. Maybe it's just years of sales, and I kind of felt like, with the added pressure of obviously kids, I have to make this work, and so and I still have to make this work, right? Because we're not like really in the clear, so to speak. Yeah. So I think it was good motivation. Actually don't know if I would have done it had I not had this like external, well, not external, but outside of work pressure.
So, Max, how did you get your team to stay alongside you during those healthy risks? Because 4 pivots is a lot. I think we can justify in our head, but how do you get a team to come alongside you, especially as a startup?
It's a good question. I think like ultimately is having that North Star has always been. Well, I think actually let me dial it back. I think when you bring people into the company, and the way that I've structured Trigify anyway, is we're relatively flat in terms of like a structure. One of the things that I loved about working at startups when they were at their best is when people had the freedom to kind of be creative, do whatever they, not whatever they wanted to do, but like effectively do whatever they wanted to do, and to have impact. And I think ultimately, as long as everyone is aligned towards what is the end goal, because the North Star of the product was changing, but the North Star on the vision about like what we want Trigify to become has always remained consistent across our of the the employee base. Um, People were okay with the pivots because it was taking us, actually, maybe it might seem from an outside point looking in that you're starting again, but really in our heads it's actually taking a step closer to where we need to go. And I think a lot of people get nervous with pivots if there's no rationale. We're a very data driven business. And so like the data is suggesting that we make this pivot. And so if they can see that and they can comprehend it, it helps everyone buy into the vision.
Yeah, that's so true. One of the things that Julie and I talk so much about with leaders, Max, is clarity around the communication. So if you're interpreting that data and the communication, the direction is clear to everyone. You have more of that buy-in from the team so that they are on board, so that they do have freedom to bring that creativity to the table and kind of continue the journey forward. And I think when you're not having that as a leader, when you're not having that clear communication about like, hey guys, this is where we're going. This is what we're seeing. What that does is it creates this place where there's fear, right? There's fear associated with that. And so it kind of creates this place where the team is stuck. So I think, especially it's easier to do with smaller teams than it is with larger teams, but it's so important. So Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, like on that, like we're a highly transparent business, and I'm transparent both internally and externally. So, if you, I don't know if anyone does follow me that watches the podcast. I don't know what the overlap is, but if you do, you'll notice that like post every win and every loss that Trigify does. Like, and I've done it ever since the journey started. What we're doing, what I'm thinking, the pivots, pre doing the pivots. I talk about them. I have a vlog. I do a vlog every week. I talk about these things. That same level of transparency is even more transparent with the entire company. So the entire company has access to, the financials of the company, how well we're doing, where we're performing, what's working, what's not. And I think ultimately, if you treat everyone as an adult, regardless of their job title, people like understand business logic, and it makes sense to them. That combined with the fact that I said I'm really data driven, so I actually MPS my team every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks they get like 3 questions that just ask them as like, how are you doing? What can I do to make your life easier? And hey, like, would you recommend Trigify to anyone else to join Trigify? And it takes them like 5 minutes to answer, and it's more like, of course, I have one-to-ones and things like that. It just keeps like a pulse and to see how like everyone is doing and feeling for us. And then we can use that when I'm starting to see things. I leverage technology to help with leadership and help with management. So then I have an AI summarizing and feeding this back to me. So if we're seeing that things are trending differently for an individual, we also can start to intervene as well, and put more focus on that outside of the normal like human touch points that we have as well.
That's so good. Yeah, those checkpoints, frequently, I think as a leader, because otherwise you can get out of touch with what's going on with the team. And like you said, keeping a pulse on everyone, that's so important. You mentioned transparency, the fact that you're putting the wins, the losses out there for really the entire world through your blog, through LinkedIn. I think that's a beautiful thing. And that's one area that we are seeing, and that's certainly trending with great leadership, is transparency within the different levels. And I think what that is creating is you have a team who's loyal, and who's not only just bought in the vision, but also to put in the work that needs to be done, because transparency brings that sense of safety for the team. That's so good.
Yeah, I think we've had a lot of people like want to come and work with us because of like the content that they're seeing from not only me but like also the team as well. We're actually pretty like we really encourage people to post um, about whatever's going on. Like we don't really care, like we don't give them an agenda, but talk about the challenges that we solve, or maybe how you're finding it, or whatever it is. Just get it out there, because I think the more visibility that you can do that, then people want to come and work with you. And what I noticed with being super transparent is you're so right, is it buys people in to you, as in uh like me individually and the business, which I think creates a level of loyalty. But that also actually happens with customers, which I think is interesting. Like they are more loyal to you because they feel like they've been on this journey with you.
Mhm.
It really helps with like employment, like hiring people when they feel like they've already been on a journey with you. They're then really brought into this whole like goal of where we're trying to go. Um, so it really helps having everyone to push towards in the right direction.
So, Max, let me ask you this. You started Trigify and you're kind of going along. Talk to me about some variables that you came across that you weren't expecting at all. And how did you overcome those challenges? I think there's some usual expectations that we can assume when starting a business or starting a startup, but what is something you weren't expecting at all? And when it came across, like how are you tackling those difficulties and how are we those hurdles?
To be fair, I think the biggest thing that I felt was I've always thought that I was a good leader and manager, and maybe I am, maybe not. Self doubt, by the way, comes in massively, and imposter syndrome. But um, I come from a sales background, right? And the culture, and it was a very hardcore sales background at Meltwater, which is like, it's very, I don't know the word to put it, but like, you work incredibly, you play hard, party hard, right? Like I think like that's like the very typical stereotypical sales culture. Like it has that. you can make a lot of money. And I loved it as like a grad going. I was this is me to a T. I come from a sporting background, and like I was like, this just feels like being part of like a team. And so like originally when I was starting Trivias, I was like, brilliant. I'll just like apply like that same kind of culture across the board. Like let's get a gong, let's get a bell, whatever. We do deals. Let's have like closing days, and everyone goes and gets pissed off at the end of like the month, and like we all have a good time. The reality is like, yeah, the only few people are actually wired like that. I don't know if I wasn't prepared or I just hadn't thought about it like that. Even marketing to sales is a different culture. Product teams are different culture. Technology teams are different cultures. Um, Everyone comes from different walks of life. They're different personality types, different traits. And I don't think that, this is why I actually hate when people do like company culture work sessions, because I I think there are behavioral company behavioral traits. So like that could be, for example, like, there's a general, like everyone is generally positive, or like as a rule of thumb, this is like the excellence that we like adhere to or whatever. But like there's no one culture for a company. And at first I was trying to like ram that down, like, square in a circle peg type thing. But quickly realized that actually, you can have traits that everyone adheres to, but really each department needs to have its own version of what they deem as like an appropriate culture, and it splinters into that. As long as the North Star's there with like the vision, and you have the right like business traits, then it kind of gels nicely. But each subsection, i.e., each department, can have their own. I find it mind blowing that like technology people aren't, interested to being comped on money. Even if they are, it's not a good thing, because you're then comping someone to rush technology building, which means the technology might not be built that way. So there's like so many different variables that you have to think about when you start creating, when you're managing people across multi departments. And it's not as simple as dangling carrots the whole time, which is what has happened with me in the sales world. Is carrots always dangled for you? Um, so I think that was like the biggest eye opener, and thing that I probably either wasn't prepared for or just hadn't thought about it.
Yeah, I got triggered by the sales bell,
Yeah.
hearing it in my thoughts right now.
I still miss it though. I do love it.
I've ever experienced a gong.
Yeah, like a gong's cool. I think a gong's better. It makes like a deeper noise, and it's like more satisfying to hit. I was trying to convince the team. I was like, okay, well, let's all buy, because we also, by the way, like the other thing that I wasn't prepared for is remote working. I hate remote working. Um, I really don't like it. I really actually don't. I don't think it is good for your health or the business in whole. That being said, we're a 100% remote company, because you also just don't need to have a business, have an office space. And if you want to find the best talent, they're everywhere, right? But when we get together, because we do quarterly meetups, productivity is through the roof. You feel better. And so that was also a shock to the system. And it took me a long time to work out, how do you build bonds culture when people like, I've not met, like we've got a developer over in South Africa, I've not met him. So it's like, how do you create relationships with people that are artificial, in the sense you don't meet people? And that I'm still working that one out. I don't have all the answers to remote working there yet, other than I think, what we're going to do going forward is, when we first hire someone, we are going to bring them over to have like an incubator period with the team, with the culture, to feel it, to breathe it, to get used to the team, to meet everyone before they then go back to whichever country or whichever location they're basically at.
That's so good. I think it's so needed because, we look at how the workplace has changed and shifted over the last 5 years. And with most teams, there is some level of remote work. And many teams, especially in the tech space, there is a lot that might be fully remote. That said, I love to hear that you guys are taking that approach to be intentional for quarterly meetups, or even like at the onboarding season, because I think what I have seen, Max, is that companies who are not doing that, they're losing great talent, because the individual is not really connected to the culture of the team. And so I think as a company, you really do have to put a focus on that because at the end of the day, even if your people want to contribute to the cause of the business, they're still people. And if your people are not connecting to the people and building that relationship to some kind, it can certainly hinder the growth and the productivity level of the organization as a whole. Um, Now, I will say there are companies that are doing it well, but they're not taking into consideration that incubator time period, like you're saying. That,
Yeah.
because when we talk to people that are with HR onboarding, that their process for that onboarding period is still being worked on by many. Let's just put it that way. And so I think it's companies in this season with technology and having those opportunities to have such a remote level team, you have to really take that into consideration.
Yeah, you're so right. It's a really hard one to balance, but I think like you hit the nail on the head. People are people, and at the end of the day, without getting too technical on it, like we are meant to be in a tribe, and to do that, like you need to meet people, and I think that's why like silent quitting is like such a thing because people can so easily silent quit when they're, on their own. And when we get together, it's a lot of workshops, a lot of fun. We do like a lot of activities, like whether it's dinners or like the last time we just did like a go karting thing. I haven't done go karting in like 20 years, but we went and we went and did it. And I think there I will say like I had some level of pushback from the developer team, um, but once they've done it, like they were like, actually, this is great. So I do think like that you can, when you get people in person, like you can really start to, it's just all about bonding, I think, at the end of the day. And I read somewhere, or I got taught a long time ago, that when you first bring in an employee or just generally, if they meet 10, 15, 20, 30 people in the first 30 days or however long, I guess, of their career with you, if they go to leave, they feel like they're letting all of those people down that they've met and created a relationship with. And so I think it's fundamentally important that they create these relationships, not because I want to trap people in, but I think to the point is like they feel like they're more part of something and therefore it's harder to leave and therefore they're more brought in to the general like business as a whole. And yeah, we try and adopt that like mindset with anyone new that we bring in.
That's
Yeah, I
Go ahead.
yeah, that is good. I think, Taryn, we had talked to some leaders and, their aspect is they're hiring people from all over the world. So the expense of flying everybody in quarterly, especially with the larger teams, can get a little difficult. And so I do have a question. So as you have all these people all over the world and you're trying to build this very tight knit um, community, I would say, like a community that's bought in. Talk to me a little bit about how has that changed your way of communication? How's communication changed for you? I mean, being a salesperson and the way you communicate and like I tell Taryn, like, put your sales pitch Taryn face on. Like there's a different ego and an alter ego there for Taryn when she's selling something versus when she's just being real and connecting with people. What's changed for you as a CEO? In the way you engage with people.
Um, do you know what's changed me? I think is actually becoming a dad. I think I was pretty ruthless pre-dad, and I think I would still be to this day. So I think it happened all simultaneously when I became a CEO and a founder. That's obviously when I became a dad, as you know, right? Um, and I think that's allowed me to. I think I just have more empathy as a leader than I ever used to as a salesperson. I used to have very high expectations, and if I could do it, you should be able to do it. And that was like my mantra, and I don't think my standards have dropped. I just think I'm able to connect with people in a way that I never was before. I've also like throughout like my career leading up to Trigify, like I was burning myself out working so hard. So I started feeling I had a lot of like mental health stuff as well around like anxiety and panic attacks. I'm just like pushing myself to too hard point. And I think that experience when I was going through that also then helped kind of just shape me as a more well-rounded individual, which has allowed me to manage and communicate with teams that aren't salespeople. So I can communicate with developers, I can communicate with product, with finance people in a way that, not that I couldn't, I just don't think I really had the skill set, empathy, emotional intelligence, understanding, and patience to be able to do it before. So I think those two kind of like life experiences allowed me to do that more so than stepping into the CEO role. If I'm totally honest, I don't think stepping into the CEO role would have changed anything unless I hadn't those experiences. I think for me, anyway, personally.
You are speaking our language. We talk so much about communication and emotional intelligence, even on our private conversations between Julie and I, because you really do have to have a level of emotional intelligence in order to be effective in your communication, in your personal life, as well as work or any area of relationship. You know, you talked about empathy, and we've talked to some leaders even just recently where we're starting to hear more and more of that empathy because the workplace culture that has specifically lacked in the workplace. And you've got like a lot of ruthless leaders and salespeople can be aggressive. I've been in sales, I get it. And I hate to say this when you were like, you're ruthless. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And I still kind of think that way sometimes, Max. And so I catch myself going, oh, wait, maybe they don't have the same experience. Maybe I do need to be a little more empathetic. And so I think as leaders, we do have to have that. I want to touch on one area that you brought up about mental health. I know with any type of role, especially sales, there's so much pressure. You work hard, you play hard. There's a lot of different industries where I think that also translates. But you don't have to get into details about your own personal story. But what are you seeing specifically around mental health, and how are individuals being impacted in the workplace? What are you seeing as some maybe just even personal tips or tools and resources that people can take advantage of to have a more balanced approach in life?
Yeah, it's you know what I touched on like remote work. Like I don't think remote work is good. Sitting in this office that I have like day in day out, like it's not good. I think anything in mental health, like you read any literature or you speak to any therapist, community kind of cures a lot of things, and having friends and things like that you can be in touch with the entire time, like because innately like humans require a tribe, like I said. So I do think that's a challenge, but you know, for me personally, I've always just pushed myself and pushed myself because, I basically, without going too deep for you, I just always sucked at like just validating whether I had done a good job or not. So there was no, I was one of those people that you get promoted and I was like, okay, well, what's next now? I need to go again. And you can never stop and take stock. And I think, I put a lot of like time and effort. It's funny, like with work, I was so clinical at like self evaluating myself, working out what I needed to do. And I just slowly started to try and apply that mindset into just work on like me as a whole. And through like kind of self discovery, journaling, I started speaking to therapists and things like that. It just allowed me to understand myself like a little bit better, but also like allowed me to work out that, hey, it is just a job at the end of the day. And, Trigify is my baby, but at the end of the day, it is just a company. And who cares? And I think for me, having kids has really again helped add perspective that like work isn't the be all and end all, and it's not like what defines you, and nothing is really like it's your achievements is not what defines you. And I think with salespeople, we're all quite wired because it's a very black and white, like, did you hit quota this month or not? And like you live your life through, am I a good salesperson because of this? And I came from a sporting background, which is the same like concept. And I think a lot of salespeople do also come from that type of background. So I think it's all wired there. But I think the first thing is to like really spend some time working on yourself, work out like what is driving you, what's not, like who you are, and when do you need to kind of, I guess, discharge. So I do this thing now once a year where I go camping for like 4 days, and I do take a phone, but it's switched off. But I basically, it's like a digital detox. I speak to no one, and it's just me going, and it's like my way of like recharging, because like I just live behind a camera lens most of the time, and it's fairly full on, and you're always smiling and being this version of yourself. And I think you need that, and I think it's all about learning those coping mechanisms, and that's what it's been for me, I don't do meditation. I don't do any things like that. It's more about just learning what do I need to do and when do I do it, and looking at like I guess like the warning signs when you're pushing yourself to a place that you're not or you shouldn't be going.
But I think also being aware of that makes you a better leader. I think self awareness and understanding that people who are able to be self aware of, hey, I'm reaching my max. Hey, I'm snapping. Hey, I need a break. Hey, I need to step away. Hey, those type of things I think make people better leaders because I think it also helps us to make, hey, now is not a good time for me to make a decision. And so I think that is actually very important to just even being a great leader.
Yeah. I think like have like suffering from like anxiety and stuff in the past um has it totally changed me as a leader. Totally changed me. And I think it, you know, I actually am a believer, like, and I don't think I'm not advocating for people to go have mental health issues, but like it allows me to understand the mind and how people tick and how people work when you go to like dark places. I think far better than people who haven't experienced that. And so I think it's really allowed me to be able to connect with people and help people because it's kind of amazing once you tell people that you struggle with things. Basically, everyone is really in some shape or form. And it allows me to connect with them through showing vulnerability. Like, I realize that you have to show vulnerability and that lets people in. And then there's trust created through that as well. And so I've always been pretty open about like, what I've gone through and how I've like overcome, elements that I've battled. And in doing so, again, with the team and whoever I'm chatting with in a one to one, it creates buy-in. If you show vulnerability, they show vulnerability. And there's then a level of like, I don't know what it is, mutual alignment, trust, connection, something happens and it's a special place.
Yeah, that's so good. We could talk about this all day long. I think because there's so many pieces of this conversation, Max, that I think is so important and valuable on an individual level, but also for companies. And, you know, I have to say, this is the first time I've talked to a CEO that's like, at the end of the day, it's just a company. Seriously, because you're valuing yourself, and your own personal identity above the work, and I think that that just points to the leader that you are for your team, and to be able to be that transparent and vulnerable is a gift. It's a gift, and so I would just encourage those that are listening to challenge themselves in this area, but also creating space for people to be people first before you're looking to them for what they can contribute, because people have to be seen and heard.
I think people are under the illusion that if you don't like die hard fanatically care, that means you don't care. And I think it's quite so far from the truth. I think the moment that I realized it is just a job is the moment that, and it is just a company is the moment that all the pressure went. And I actually think I work harder sometimes than I ever did before. But stress and pressure is only if you feel like you can't deliver on it. You could work 20 hours a day, and if like there's feeling no pressure, like you're not going to be under stress, right? I'm not saying that you should do that, but the point being is that if you are piling pressure on your employees and yourself, and they feel like they can't match that, that's where stress levels start to rise. But if people feel comfortable and is like, okay, this is just a job or this is just a company and there are bigger things in life to be worrying about, which I think the world needs to just to realize right now with how crazy the world's going on. I think it puts the pressure off, and therefore actually I think people work harder than they actually ever would do, and they care more than what they ever would do, but they just feel okay and good about doing it. It's not coming from a place of fear or anxiety or stress or whatever it is that's driving them to do it. And I know in my case, some days I'll work 13, 14-hour days, massive days. And other days, like I know like next day I can just take it off or chill and wind down. Like, and that's fine. And I think that's also acceptable to know that people will have like peaks and troughs. And that's what we adopt to Trigify is we work in sprints. And, some sprints we might need to be just absolutely gunning it. And then we know that we need a cooling off period. And that's just like the way that I think that's the way companies have always worked. People just don't want people to work like that. They just want them to be always on. And it's just not, it's not achievable. It's not achievable.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. It's almost like you're giving permission to people to do what they need to do in order to take care of themselves as a person first, and creating that space. Max, this has been phenomenal. I've so enjoyed this conversation. Now, you mentioned earlier on this session that you also have a vlog. So, if people want to follow you, where can they find your vlog?
YouTube, LinkedIn, go. I post it on both places. So yeah, head to Max Mitcham on YouTube or Max Mitcham on LinkedIn, and yeah, go check it out.
Perfect. We'll make sure and tag that in there too. Well, Max, thank you so much for your time for this conversation. It's been such a pleasure.
All good. No, I really enjoyed this one. Appreciate it.
Thank you.